Financial institutions are potentially entering a phase in which workflow discussions are no longer focused on automation, but on some of these flows actually becoming autonomous. There are numerous conversations about agentic AI's ability to navigate data, execute tasks, and even make operational decisions, and I have the receipts. I believe that these things are possible, but the question for me is, to what extent? This episode of ATP wants to dig deeper into how or can agentic operations fundamentally transform workflows and value creation inside financial services. What does autonomous work actually look like in real-life scenarios? I have some of my own examples. And what kind of governance, oversight, or human roles must evolve if AI agents become primary operators rather than passive tools? ATP is joined by Chee, SVP and GM for APAC at and Julien, Condamines, a co-founder and chief revenue officer at Novo AI, to help us unpack all of this. Chee and Julien, welcome back to the show. It's great to have two people who've never met each other. Well, you just met on the show to talk to each other. Thank you both for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Excited to be home again.
Yeah, thank you as well. And when you were really talking about the agentic and the human, I started to reflecting and thinking, okay, we need to have maker and checker. We need to have agent propose, humans approve. We need to have agents action is log versions and audit. We still have to make that intense. So it was just a quick things glance through my mind that I want to start with that.
I love talking to you because you never stop thinking. It's really kind of cool. Okay, let's start with one big question. What does fundamentally change when financial institutions shift from automated processes to autonomous operations? Julien, let's start with you.
Well, I think it changes everything. It redefines the entire way an organization is working. You go from having a lot of people using mostly their hands and not so much their brain. So not like people actually not being able to think so much because they're too busy entering data, doing a bunch of tedious repetitive jobs. And all of a sudden you have what they call agents, right? So you put an army of little tech soldiers to actually do the tedious job, and so that people can actually use their brain to add value where it's necessary, where empathy is needed, where cognitive intelligence is needed, and where tech is nowhere close to replace them.
Yeah, I think when you're really looking at all that, I still feel like there is a brains and there is a tools. We talk about that a couple of times. Strategies, they can write a really good prompt versus normal someone who doesn't know insurance to write a prompt. I'm pretty sure if Julien is write a prompt, he will write and get the answer which is closer and more useful to what he has. So what I'm trying to put this point here is, when you are writing a prompt and you are the expert in that field, you literally almost will get a better answer than a prompt where it is written by a novice in a payments, say, example, because the keywords that you are talking about, the experts that you want to reference to, that is making the prompt or agents become more intelligent in our day-to-day. So that's why I always will split these two, the intelligence, the brains, and the tools. And the more intelligent the strategies, they make use of the tools more effectively.
So basically, that's the way you actually train juniors, right? You prompt them to actually do the right job, and because you have the right question, you direct them in the right place, and you can do that. But I feel like someone who doesn't know the right question will actually waste a lot of time. That's what you see in operation in all corporates, and eventually maybe even come up with a bad output. While if you have the good question, the other thing that, and I think we've all observed that, all of a sudden you have junior employees that work so fast that you can't even afford to ask the wrong question, because you see it right away when the answer is wrong, and you can do research and you can explore many more avenues. And that really the notion of augmenting yourself is what happens, where you're like, oh, all of a sudden I can do so much more in such little time, and it's crazy. And so I think that's what people expect to happen where AI is improving, is that we'll have organization where people are expected to be 5 times more productive and in twice as less time, right? And so it's kind of mind blowing to think about that, but it's already happening. I don't know about you guys, but I'm way more productive than I was years ago.
So Julien, I want to share a story with both of you, because you posted that on LinkedIn a few days ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, and I commented on it just a little bit, but here's my longer comment. When I was at Goldman Sachs and we first started, actually, well, this is when I was at Deutsche Securities, actually, when we first started trading programs automatically, we just had a slicing mechanism. And I literally had to do it manually. 2% of this, 5% of that, 7% of that, 25% of a day's volume. And I had to look at every single stock and figure it out. And it was based on my understanding of that stock's liquidity on a day-to-day basis. Then we built a slightly more automatic slicer, and then we built an entire mechanism that could look at every stock instantaneously, make those same decisions, and trade it through different algorithms that we built. But the key thing that happened was we went from trading $200 million of stock value a day to like 3 or 4 billion. This is exactly what you're talking about. I didn't lose my job, but I was just doing way more of it in that sense.
Yeah. So they call the Jevons paradox, right? People think like because we are more productive, we're just going to stop working, but we still just work the same way. We just produce way more, and we create a lot more new, more complex problem on the way. And so all of a sudden, before we actually deal with the new reality, we get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that we created, right? We just build a bigger mountain, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, I'm not really sure I know how to climb that mountain anymore.
Or how to get down.
I'll get down from it.
Yeah, it is pretty scary. It is pretty scary in a way because I thought that I get things done faster so that I get more time back. But actually,
But
it is
no.
not because you, yeah, it did not happen, right? It became like, hey, we get more things done. Let's think about what's new. So, like just a few days ago, my CEO is prompting us like, hey, just imagine clean slate. If you have the best AI engineers that you can hire, what would you like to achieve? What does the North Star look like in the products that we are trying to solve? And that is amazing, right? Because when you're really thinking about that, then we started to look at top 5 agents that I can build to help me to do the things that I want to do. So if you say top 5 agents, number one, in my world, I'll be troubleshooting operational issues quicker. Because instead of solving my customers like a SLA of 2 hours or 1 hour, then I probably can solve it in 5-10 minutes with the right troubleshooting agents. So then I started to think, oh, wow, there's so much we can do. So basically, yes, we do think faster, but we also come up with more useful stuff quicker. And we become, I think, busier at the same time.
I like to think of work as a ball that you're bouncing, right? And so you launch the ball on the wall and it bounces back, right? And all of a sudden you're able to launch 5 balls much faster.
Yeah.
So you have 5 back coming back to you, and it keeps going. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, you don't really know where to look at unless you learn how to receive those balls and deal with them.
And talking about that, right, then we suddenly need to really use a little bit more human brain and experience to strategize and think, what is my priority? If I have 5 or 10 balls bouncing back to me, I can't handle all of them. What the markets needs? How quick is the markets moving so that they can also receive the benefits of it? And we are not talking about landing in the moon where everybody it is still coming out from the cave or something like that. Yeah.
And are they actually prepared, and do they have the capability to do that? We have one of our top clients at the moment that has exactly this problem where we're doing claim analysis and we're looking at every single insurance claim for abuse, right? And so we're talking about thousands of claims every day. And the CEO of the company came back to me and saying, like, you know what, we can't continue if that's good for your analysis, but we're going to stop doing that because I don't have a team that's actually able to look at every single claim. So we have to find a way to consolidate that in a way we can transform it into value. But we see a lot of the value of what you're doing. We just don't have right now the capability to handle that and like manage every single claim and chase the people that generated the abuse on that. And so we're going to have to pick our battles basically because we just can't handle all of that you're sending to us.
So one of the questions that I got actually this week was somebody asked me, because I posted something again about agentic AI, and someone said, okay, that's great if agents take over certain tasks, but what about human intuition? And this is kind of one of the things that the two of you are hinting at. Where does that fit in, right? These insights that you're talking about. Because my feeling is, if you're bouncing 5 balls against the wall, you used to be bouncing 1, you could just write more code to be able to handle the impact of those 5 things and actually have the agentic AI just keep doing that bouncing while you're thinking. But where does that intuition fit in? And does it become more useful or less useful, you think?
When I am actually relating on this, the humans and also all of us, for me, I always think like, what are the consumers' pace is at? So let us just bring it a little bit back on. I was still relating on the payments is a lot of people are still using cash today because sometimes it is still useful. But that doesn't mean that they will not be using agentic payments in the future. But in order for those group of majority or 20-30% of the people are still using cash, say for example in Thailand, to straight away jump into using wearable or contactless or even agentic commerce is still a huge jump that you have to get there. And we also have to remember when we are talking about AI and AI and AI, there are still a bunch of people are not talking about AI. I was just walking through the streets at the walking to the Quartier, and I saw that there are so many street foods and the sellers, and this is their day-to-day life. And I don't think they really think about AI as much as we think about it. So what I'm trying to say is, in order for us to use all this AI and moving from this generic public to where we are top 5% people are talking about, it is still a long way. We are still having a long way to get there. We still need to start by educations, adoptions, and also is it simple enough for them to understand, or it is just a bunch of jargon that doesn't hit them day-to-day life. And that is why I felt like a lot of anxious and we are losing a bunch of jobs. Yes, we do, but we also need to understand that where are we at from the economy and markets perspective.
I want to say something really controversial. Actually, I want to say two things, but first I want to say payments in Thailand are so easy and so frictionless. I just QR code everywhere. Those people you see selling street food, they have QR codes. I had a motorcycle driver guy. I said to him, "How can I pay?" And he literally pointed to the back of his helmet where there was a QR code. I almost fell off the bike because I was laughing so fast.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the controversial thing, and I want both of you to think about it at least or comment on it. I've seen so many tech cycles, like so many of them. And every time something new came around, they're like, everyone's going to lose their job and unemployment's going to go to 75%. I don't think that's true this time either. I really don't, because exactly in what you guys are saying, every time a new technology comes that makes humans more productive, they give humans more to do. So there'll be layoffs. But those people, I think, will be rehired because it's getting easier and easier to do work. And I'm curious what you think about what I think is maybe a controversial statement, because I feel like most people don't agree with me.
QR code is make it so simple for people to understand. So simple. So if we can translate everything in AI, become so simple for the greater adoptions, I do think that that is where the business should be thinking. Make a complex issue, simplified it, and adoptions will be there. Yeah, I'll stop here. Julien, please go ahead.
No, that's great. But first, on the job side, I think it will definitely destroy some job, but more than destroy, it will make them more strategic. I think basically we're building organization that work like a machine, and people will become more and more, orchestrators of agent, like agent manager, and they will have a role of like controlling the output and organizing their teams and all that. And so, yeah, that's gonna. I don't know that I would call that like upskilling the job or any. I don't know that it's better or worse, but it's going to change the type of job. And so people who are like, for lack of a better word, in white collar job, they're going to have to learn how to handle that. Otherwise, they'll be outdated very, very fast. But on the other side, what I really like about AI, and that's what made me jump into that pool in the first place, is that for the first time in a long time in those tech revolution, you have a technology that can get into the hand of people very, very easily. Talk about blockchain even to people that are very, very educated, and 99% of the population still doesn't even understand what it means.
No idea.
Like, Web3, most people can give you a proper definition, and probably among one of them, right? But Gen AI in particular, more than AI, like as a whole, like Gen AI, all of a sudden you have a chatbot and you can do stuff with it. You can improve the way you work. You could learn how to generate the QR code so that you can put it at the back of your helmet, even though you've never done anything that's tech related. And that's something that excites me in the same way that anyone can use Google Maps, then anyone can make payment even though they're not tech genius. And I think that's what exciting about that. And so if you can make AI turn the world a better or easier place for people, I think that's where most of the value is, and where it becomes very, very exciting. And on the corporate or large organization side, I think what's going to happen is that all of a sudden we get rid of the tedious and hard job. But what happens is like, oh, all of a sudden I've got time to do what was before a dream that I couldn't achieve, right? Because I had to do, like 80% of my time was dealing with those crappy processes before, and now all of a sudden I've got not so much more time, but I've got the time to actually think of bigger problems and ways to make the experience better. And in my case, like making insurance better. And I can think about a zillion ways to make insurance better, right? But you're like, oh, how can you do that if you don't have the right data? If you can't process the data, if you cannot orchestrate them, if you don't have the right insight, like it's impossible. So yeah, you can dream of it, but never gonna happen.
Can I just give you one more example from my trading experience? Because that's the exact same thing that happened to us, right? Again,
what if we say no?
We had all these. You can say no, and I'll go home. It's fine. But I just want to make an analogy. Once we automated the entire trading process, it meant that we could then focus on like the things that were really hard inside of a very big and complex trade, and we could actually break them out and do smaller things with that and pay more attention to it. And I think it has to be the same thing in the insurance industry and in the payments industry as well, is that once you automate out the tedium, because it was super tedious what we did and very repetitive, I have to believe that in the insurance industry and in the payment space and through finance in general, that once you eliminate the tedium, that there is time to think, and then you can do the things that you couldn't do before. Yeah.
And it grows both ways, right? So all of a sudden you think more strategically, but then because you do that, you open new Pandora boxes. And each of the idea that you have becomes a new stuff that drills down into many aspects and many stuff that you never imagined. And then all of a sudden you have to think about new ways to solve that and all that. So yeah, it's an infinite loop. And that's why I don't think we'll ever lack of jobs anywhere in the world. As long as you're curious and you can put your mind to solve one of those problems, you'll always have a job, I think.
Agreed.
I was actually when I was looking at the questions and I was preparing, something just came into my mind. I love cooking, and there is this very intelligent machines called Thermomix. It's costing like $2,000-3,000 for that machine. And then I think about, hey, I still need to cut all the ingredients, and if I want to make a party, if someone is really just cutting the cube, or I don't know what is the French names that they call it, where you cut it in a square and then it will make the food looks nicer, cook
It's
evenly,
actually
and all
called
that.
Julien. Believe it or not.
Oh, Julien,
That is
yes,
awesome.
exactly.
That is the best thing ever.
Yeah. So if I love cooking, but I don't like to do the prep work, and I don't like to do the repetitive stirring for 3 hours to make the sauce, right? So I mean, if we are really thinking about that, a good chef can still cook more delicious meals with help with all these tools, and then they can delegate. And when people can delegate, we achieve more. We actually can make a better party with a finer food instead of a more chunky homemade food. So I was just have that reflections when we were talking about these things, and that is where I feel like there is a lot of analogy we can think about in our day-to-day life.
So are there parts of finance? It segues really nicely into something we were going to talk about anyway, right? So maybe the chopping is too manual, and maybe it can't scale, right? Because maybe in everybody's house you can't have a machine that does the chopping. Julien, I love this. I'm going to keep using this forever now, particularly when Julien's on the podcast. But are there parts of financial services businesses, whether it's in insurance, in banking, in payments, that just are too manual to scale, at least now? Do you know what I mean? Are there?
Like, I think the chopping part is actually something, it's actually relating to the thing that you can automate in an organization. For me, it's really the data capture, orchestration, all those really repetitive stuff where you don't really need a brain to do that. What I think is not going to scale is really the stuff that are inherently human. The stuff where you need to, where it's such a gray zone that you actually need to use your sensitivity to make a decision, where you read a report and you're like, yeah, sure, we shouldn't cover that, but like, given the situation, we should probably make a different decision. Or where even sometimes subjective decision, yeah, we should refuse that, but and that's a real example. For instance, we should refuse this case, but this is coming from the wife of the CEO of the group that we're insuring, so of course we should approve that. But give that to an AI, it's going to look at it and like, no, not approving. And then you lose the client, right? And that's, and again, this is a terrible example because this is an example that talks about bias used in a way that's going to save a business. And so it's wrong in so many levels, but if you think of it from a business perspective, that's absolutely what you should do. And so there's a bunch of stuff like that where you require empathy, when you require to read between the lines, literally, where AI is nowhere close to get there, where it doesn't understand these kind of nuances. Maybe it will one day, but we're nowhere clear about that. Nowhere near
not
that.
there. Yeah. Yeah. Talking about scalability, right, Michael, and also using AI in our day-to-day work, especially in right now we are at the scale up phase. When you're really looking at the scale up phase, if you're looking at its HR, interviewing faster, and also using the tools to run through all the thousands of resume and pick up the right candidate faster, yes, it does. However, you go and look at the BD team. Did they actually enhance the pitch deck using AI? Yes, they do. However, when you are talking about from pitch deck to the product team, to the compliance team, to the HR team, and then to get all of them into a systems that can behave like a well-oiled machine and connected, communicating from one team to another, I think a lot of companies are still struggling doing that because it is a system that we're talking about. It is a process, it's an SOP. And we are not just talking about, I am doing AI in this particular role, in this particular job or task. But what about doing it together as a company and especially for a scale up like Julien, like Novo, and also like Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of conversation, and you just triggered something in my brain to remember like how much we tested the algorithms that we built for trading. And I don't know why I'm talking about this so much today, but maybe because it's such an obvious analog to what's happening in finance in general, and payments and insurance today. We would like test these algos, and if they came out with what we thought was an expected outcome, and some of them were really complex, and the money that was at stake was huge, hundreds of millions of dollars, we would literally test them on a Saturday, roll them out in a small way on a Monday or Tuesday, and if we thought they worked, we'd just run with them. So I hear all this talk about like, what if an agent does something it's unintended or unanticipated and we can't really trust it? And yet we were doing this years ago. I don't want to say people are focusing way too much on it, but are people so afraid of rolling out new stuff and they're worried about their own liability that they're not going to do this in a way that's fast enough? Do you understand what I mean?
I think there's a benchmark that naturally people look at perfection. They want AI to be perfect, but then when you look backwards and you look what humans are doing,
right. But you make a really good point because, like, again, you talk about your junior employee. If you're making this idea that like the agentic AI is similar to a junior employee, Tom could be sitting over there doing insanely crazy things that you don't know about until the end of the day.
That's exactly what happens when we look at insurance preparation today. Data are captured manually by people that do that day in, day out. You think they make no mistake? You think they read doctor's note that no one can read in the world and they get it perfectly? That doesn't happen. Like, the level of accuracy is somewhere around 80-85%. And our AI can do better than that. So that's kind of like the benchmark that we're looking at, saying like, hey, if you can improve the current situation and no one dies in the process, then you should absolutely use it. And because now it's not just like, hey, we're gonna fire John and Jack, and they're gonna go away, and we're gonna have only this AI solution working. Is like, no, Jack and Joe will be able to review what the AI has done and improve what it's done wrong. So instead of having 80-85% done by automatically instead of Jack and Joe, now you have still the same amount of accuracy, and then someone actually looking at this and saying like, oh, I could actually do it better. The same happens. There's a fantastic story about that. Like they've done, and that's a Stanford study, right? So pretty credible. They've done a study about doctors doing a complex diagnosis, and can't remember the exact numbers, but I think the level of accuracy was somewhere around 75%
for doctors,
which is a bit scary.
I was going to say it's a little scary, a little too low for me, but
that tells you that 25% of the time the diagnosis is not actually correct, right? And that study has been done with real doctors. And then they tested AI. AI was doing something around 86%. And so you're like, cool, should have AI. But then what's interesting is that when you add AI plus doctors, the level would go down.
Yeah.
Why?
Sure.
Because doctors wouldn't trust the AI.
Right.
And so it would go like to 82%. But in reality, it should be better. It should be like, hey, looking at that. And that's been reviewed by people that can actually, like have a proper opinion. But of course, they're subjective. But what you see is like it's when you blend the two that the best result should come in, right? And so, and I think that's the way forward when you actually empower people with an assistant that can look at more data much faster, look at references you don't have access to, and propose that to your brain and say like, hey, look, now you've got more dots to connect and you can make better decisions. But it requires getting people to get used to that process and also swallowing their ego and thinking like, oh, maybe I was wrong about that. And yeah, this stupid machine is actually not as stupid as I thought.
Exactly. Do you think there's a generational thing there? Like, do you think the next generation of doctors, in the same way like the next generation of payments people and insurers, will just be like, look, I trust the AI, and you can have. I wrote down this note like someone looking over your shoulder, right? Because it's almost like if I'm not trusting my intern, I'm not going to hire somebody to just look over their shoulder. I either trust them or I don't after a while. And I think AI is the same way. But at some point, go ahead.
There's a running joke about that. I've just seen it this morning. I cried out laughing. You know, like there's this new rule of ChatGPT saying like, ChatGPT cannot like give like medical advice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What do you think your doctor is doing today? Your GP?
I know exactly. He's going right to ChatGPT.
Like that's exactly what they do. It's not even the next generation. Like, no clue. What could it be? I had a doctor literally the other day. I had like a reaction to whatever, and like I was a doctor, and like he looked on the internet, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it confirmed what I saw. Those are the symptoms." It wasn't even AI; it was proper Google, and I was like, "Are you really googling my symptoms?" Like, because you can't know it all, right? So they're actually doing it already.
I think during the Uber day, lots of us have been discussing the autonomous car, right? Waymo, and also a driver. Do you trust the driver more or the autonomous car more? I mean, today there are so many driverless train already, and whether it is humans driving or non-humans driving, sometimes probably like what Julien said, the probability of the drivers being careless is much higher than an autonomous vehicle, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and the car doesn't get drunk
and you
either.
are trusting. Yeah, exactly. Because you are entrusting your life getting onto a car, and then it is really about the perceptions of people as well. And therefore, I think AI, it is really about messaging. And what is more importantly is humans' elements, intelligence. Will be always there, and we have to always correct the narrative of AI or autonomous or agents and all this kind of thing. So, Michael, I just think that it is the narrative that people has to understand, and people like us, I hope that we can also amplify our voices, letting them know: do you really trust a human driver or you trust a machine?
So I've been talking about this for years, but like, I don't think most people realize how automated airplanes are, right? And cars don't fall out of the sky. But I would guess that a pilot on just a normal flight is backing up from the runway. I mean, backing up from whatever that thing, I don't remember what it's called anymore, getting onto the runway, pressing a button for takeoff, hanging out, looking at things, making sure everything's okay. If there's turbulence, maybe they're adjusting some things, maybe. And then on landing, they just make sure that like the autopilot is landing properly. And then they thank all the passengers for doing it. But I bet like 90% of the people on the plane have no idea. They think some dude's up there like steering, right? And you're in a plane in the sky. So yeah, I think the narrative has to change around that as well.
Absolutely. EV is such, like the autonomous vehicle is such a good comparison because like, yeah, you said like EV, like the vehicle doesn't get drunk, is not tired, doesn't text while driving.
No, exactly.
Doesn't think about the crap day that they had. Like, like it's not stressed out because of something, hasn't driven for like 18 hours. That it's often the case in Singapore.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather have like a vehicle that's autonomously driven like any day. Like it's.
Oh my God, I was in a taxi on a small island in I'm gonna say it, in Japan, like a really small island. And when you got in, you saw the guy literally take a paper bag and like put it underneath his seat and then start driving. And I was like, oh, maybe we should get out of this taxi. But we didn't have a choice because it was a tiny island. This was the scariest taxi ride of my whole life. But you're exactly right. Exactly right. But then here's this other question, though. If something does go wrong, right, because you know this, whether it's an airplane or an automated car or whatever, you know kind of who's liable. But in an operational place, and I know I was liable when I was trading. It didn't matter what the algo did. I was meant to make sure that it didn't do anything stupid. And if something went wrong, it was my problem. But in other places, like where does the liability lie? And even from an insurance perspective, where does it lie? And even from a payments, what if it double pays, triple pays, quadruple pays, right? Where's the liability for this?
The problem has already been solved with autonomous vehicle, actually, right? It's a false. I think it's a false product. The first short answer is like, who cares? You know, like if on the general level you have 10%, 15%, 50% less accident, then it should be a no-brainer that you should go for it. And then the question is, how do you define it? And you can start with a framework and improve it over time. But I think at some point, like in the case of AI in institution, decisions should be owned by institutions, and they are the one defining what decision should be human or not, and so they should be accountable for that. System behavior should be who should be accountable is the people who have built the system. So if your system fails, if the autonomous car fails because the engine breaks or like the AI doesn't respond or stuff like that, then they should be accountable for that, so that they have some sort of accountability and they are responsible if someone dies because of them. And you keep humans to supervise exceptions, like in your example of the plane, right? Like a engine doesn't react. Well, okay, take the command again and make sure that you are the one taking the selfie at the end of the flight.
Exactly.
And then you start with a generic framework and you deal with exceptions over time, I think.
I'm also going towards the framework. And what is the foundational framework that we already have in place today in terms of liability shift from payments perspective? There will be who is taking care of that particular transactions when it happens. Okay, so I'll just take a step back and talk about liability shift when it comes to who owns that when it goes wrong. If the merchant says, I really like a good customer experience and I don't want to do a authentications or one-time password, then that is the choice of the merchant say that I don't want to take that. I want a better user experience over fraud. So when fraud happen, then everything, the liability will be held by the merchant, not the bank, not the card holder, because that is the core. So all this kind of framework, it is already being in place today and it shouldn't change. Ownership shouldn't change. If you are the leader of the sales team, you still own the number. If you are the CEO of the company, regardless agent make a mistake or the human, it is still the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we were doing this algorithmic trading, it didn't matter. Like the algo sometimes did really mucked up things, but it was still your fault.
Yeah, but I think at the beginning that still should be the case.
I agree.
Early days, and also because you don't want to make people too lazy to actually care.
No, yeah, exactly.
No,
But there were traders that did my job, and they literally did what we called set it and forget it. And those guys and gals got into huge trouble because sometimes the algo, it's not perfect, right? Because humans are designing it. And sometimes
then when it goes wrong, you don't understand it.
You don't understand because you're not paying attention.
So you can't revert it.
Yeah, and you can't fix it.
We've seen that at the beginning, like I think like year and a half when we started pitching the company, we saw there was a big gap of knowledge and understanding of what AI could do. And so you had people on one or the other side of the scope. The first side was like, you're a liar, that doesn't happen, that can be happening. Basically, you're just selling snake oil. The other side was like, finally a wizard that can solve all the problem that I don't understand.
Right.
I'm gonna hand out the key of the fort and solve that for me so that I don't actually have to understand the problem. And that's lack of accountability. And at some point I was like, that's not how it works. Like that. And by the way, we can't do that. But it was like kind of like question of like, can your AI do and like whatever problem they never understood before, right? And no, it can't.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why at the beginning accountability should not shift until you're confident that the engine works and you understand that when is the failure the responsibility of whom. But as Chee was saying, like decisions at some point, if that's a decision that impacts someone, keep it to the manager.
Yeah, and look, the reason why I asked the question is not to get a definitive answer. I think for us, we have a good understanding of like where some of that liability lies. But I do want the audience to think about when they're using AI, are they paying close enough attention? Where does the liability lie? Who is accountable? I want people to think about this when they're using it, and also for people that are developing it, think, how can I make it so that it's easy for people who are accountable to use this in a way that's better?
No, it just made me think about like what we were saying earlier, right? But thing happening when you automate those processes, right? So we we automate claim processing and we flag the one that are suspicious. But all of a sudden, we
Yeah.
clear 85% of the claim that people should have looked at before.
Right.
And so and no one will ever complain that their claim was AI processed.
And
if
approved.
the outcome is, yes, we're going to pay you and faster than you should have, right? So that everyone's happy with that.
Yeah.
And so there's no liability issue in that. And so this one can be completely automated. No one has to look at it. But then the side effect of that is that instead of having to look at 100 claims, now those people have to look at 15 claims. And so they can take the time to make sound decision. And the AI is still like taking care of some of the work, saying like, hey, look, this is why we flagged it. And this is a suggestion of how you could solve that. And so it makes the work of those people much easier. And so the accountability should be even double, because all of a sudden you've had your work done for you, and all you have to do is check and make a final decision. And so, but we fail to see that those are people with more time and more headspace to actually think through the decision. And so that's the beauty of it, I think.
Chee, I'll give you the last word.
I know that I remember you were talking about that, who is going to take that accountability. There are lots of people has been discussing autonomous vehicle again, right? Is it the car maker? Is it Uber? Is it Waymo? Is it the apps? Because imagine all these can be at different parties, right? I mean, the car maker can say like it is a car maker's problem, and then they can do all these blames and all that and controversy, and then they will then raise it to the court and fight it out. However, even that, when it comes to Uber as a ride-hailing and share ride, who is accountable for that particular ride is then you are using the Uber apps, and then Uber apps will have to discuss with the driver. The driver has to discuss with the car because they bought the car. I mean, all this framework has not changed, right? It's not because AI is here, then the responsibility just disappear and then they can blame it to the robot. Yeah. Whoever used the robot has to be still responsible.
For what the robot does. Okay. Chee,
yes, for what the robot does.
Exactly. So Chee, SVP and General Manager of Rayback at and Julien Condamines, co-founder and Chief Revenue Officer at NovaAI. You two are consistently awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you so much.